Good evening, everybody. We'll get started in just one moment. We're just waiting for some last things to come into place, but just give us one more minute. Okay, excellent. Good evening, everybody. Just make sure your microphones are on mute, and if later in the program, if you have questions, we'll unmute you. But just for the purposes of my name is Jeremy Wimpheimer, and on behalf of the Tzahar Rabbinical Organization, Tzahar, and Tzahar120, which we'll be discussing. Everybody, just make sure you're on mute, and if later in the program, if you have questions, we'll unmute you. But hold on. Yeah, sorry about that. The purpose of our program tonight is entitled Medicine, Social Work, and Jewish Law. And we're honored to have experts from the various relevant fields to discuss the issue of a multidisciplinary look at palliative care. First off, we would just want to thank our partners at Bnefsh for helping arrange this important program and bringing this issue to the professional audience that is with us here this evening. Just one short sentence. We're going to hear from Rav Sherlow about what it is initiative, but this is a program which is providing a vital service to answer questions to individuals who are critical, ethical, and practical and halachic dilemmas at key and sometimes very challenging times in life. And Rav Sherlow will discuss how this service is done and relate to the topic that we're going to be talking about tonight in relation to palliative care. So with that, if there are questions during the course of the program, you can put them in the chat, and then we'll either take the questions for the chat, or depending on how it goes, we'll be able to call on you as well. But with that, again, thank you to Bnefsh. And I'm honored to call upon Rav Sherlow, who is the director of Czahar120. Rav Sherlow is one of the most well-respected medical ethicists, both here in Israel and around the Jewish world, and around the world of medical ethics in general. So with that, please the floor.
Shalom to everybody. Thank you, Jeremy. The medicine is very successful. And one of the results of it is that our life are much longer, and the doctors can keep us on life for many, many months, even if we collapsed. This is a situation that is a lot of blessing because we can live longer, we can know our grandchildren and great-grandchildren and whatever. But like always, it has also a big problem, and that is the dispute and the split between our body and our soul. More and more of us are have mental problems like dementia, even though the body is quite well, and more of us are, the mind is completely okay, but their body is actually a kind of a traitor. And this causes a lot of questions and a lot of problems and a lot of decisions. Czahar120 is a consultate group that helps families and staff of the hospital together to make the right decision when we have all kinds of decisions to make, and we'll introduce it later on, some of our dilemmas, of our basic ideas and whatever. I also want to thank Bnefsh. I want to thank Dr. Shaulov that is with us, and I want to thank everyone that is connected to this meeting, because I think it's really, really very important that even though in today's news, our mind is somewhere else, that actually probably every family will have to debate on those issues And as you say, the big problems that Israel have now doesn't actually chase out the regular life. So we decided to continue, and in the same time that we are together with the all Am Israel, with the kidnap people and with the security situation, we are continuing to deal with those sensitive issue. Thank you very much for everyone that is participating here tonight.
Thank you very much, Rav Shurlo. I'd like to now call upon Rabbi Yoshua Fa.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you for the opportunity.
Calendar of Bnefsh to provide some introductory remarks.
Again, thank you for joining us, and thank you for the opportunity to give introductory remarks. It's an honor to speak about a value partnership between Nefesh B'Nefesh and Tzahar. In addition to our long-standing relationship, we are proud to be included in these new efforts, namely the intersection of our international medical aliyah program with Tzahar in the realm of palliative care and the halachic sensitivities that shape this important work. As you are aware, Nefesh B'Nefesh has been long dedicated to helping Anglo-Jews make aliyah to Israel, providing support, guidance, and integration services to ease the transition. Over the last 2 decades, we have worked closely with Tzahar to help Olim receive their spiritual and religious needs. Among our many programs is the IMAP, the International Medical Aliyah Program, which stands as a pillar in facilitating the immigration of highly skilled medical professionals to Israel. We were just signed a contract a year ago. We are now the outsourced arm of the Israeli government. We are tasked to bring over 2,000 physicians from around the world in the next 5 years to help facilitate, license, and employ them. It's a huge zchut to be part of this incredible, noble work. It's a zchut to be partners with Misrad HaBriut, Misrad Aliyah V'Klita, Negev and Galil to make this undertaking possible. These 2,000 physicians from around the world not only bring their expertise, but a deep commitment to Israel and the values of healthcare, healing, and compassion. In Israel, like any other country, palliative care is an essential service. It aims to offer relief and dignity to those facing terminal illnesses, ensuring that their remaining days are marked by comfort, peace, and respect. For many of our new immigrants in the medical field, the opportunity to contribute to such a profound and sensitive area of care is a privilege and also a challenge. When we talk about palliative care in Israel, you have to acknowledge the unique challenges it poses within the framework of halacha. Just to name a few, the halachic concept of pain management, prolonging life versus quality of life, balancing the principles of pikuach nefesh, end-of-life issues, actions that may directly hasten death, artificial nutrition, and hydration. Halachic debate on our basic obligation to provide nutrition and hydration, and the halachic issues that surround patient autonomy, just to name a few. Navigating these halachic sensitivities demand both medical expertise and sensitivities to religious and ethical values. That is why our partnership with Tzahar HaMev is so critical. Tzahar's involvement in palliative care field ensures that not only that our Olim are receiving proper guidance, but the medical practitioners that are arriving are steered to offer the most effective care while adhering to halachic principles. The collaboration between Nefesh and our medical aliyah program and Tzahar is an example of what happens when capabilities and values come together. A partnership with Tzahar ensures that these professionals don't feel isolated in those decisions, that families don't feel isolated in decisions, and that the Anglo population receives the very guidance. For our immigrant medical professionals, this partnership with Tzahar is also a powerful reminder that medicine is not just about treating the body, obviously, but about respecting the dignity of every individual. It's about understanding the nuances of halacha, the tone and tenor of Jewish law that guide our practices in a compassionate and ethically responsible manner. As we move forward in this work and collaboration, Our tefillah, our prayer is at this intersection of Nefesh B'Nefesh's mission and Tzohar's expertise, along with the professional proficiency of all these medical doctors. We will, please God, transform and enhance and improve Israel's healthcare and allow and enhance the experience for families. May we all of Klal Yisrael, hear only B'Solat Tovot. Thank you for joining us today.
Amen. Thanks for many years of dedicated hard work to bring these issues to the single Anglo Aliyah, which is obviously something which is very important to all of us and our audience tonight. I'm honored to now call upon our next presenter, which is Dr. Adir Shaulov from Hadassah Ein Kerem Medical Center. Dr. Shaulov is both a hematologist and an expert in palliative care, and he will serve as the presenting the medical aspects of our presentation tonight. So, Dr.
Thank you very much. Thank you to both Tzahar and Nefesh B'Nefesh for inviting me to join you tonight. My name is Adir Shaulov. I'm a hematologist and a palliative care physician at Hadassah Medical Center. Israel is basically taking their first steps in the field of palliative care. So I'd just like to walk you through basic tenets of palliative care, just to kind of set the stage for the discussion a little bit later on. So I'm assuming I'm not surprising anyone by telling you all that at some point in time, we will all die. We tend not to think about this very much. We tend not to talk about it a lot. It doesn't usually affect our day-to-day lives. And at least in medical school, no one taught me that that happens. We have effective treatments that we've developed over the past 200 years, antibiotics and new forms of chemotherapy and biological therapy and surgeries. And when all else fails, right, we can replace your dialysis. And if you stop breathing, we can put you on a machine. There's so many amazing things that we can do. But at times, it seems that these are not really achieving two groups as well, patients on long-term dialysis. Many of them succumb to illnesses that not necessarily cause their dialysis, but come along with it. Patients in long-term care that we tend to forget that is usually in long-term care because of a disease that is insurmountable. And they interviewed these patients and asked them what's important to them at this point in their life, at this point to where they're reaching towards the end of their life. What is important to them? I'm always amazed to see the results. If you take a look here on the right, in parentheses, you'll see the percentages and the numbers in bold. So I think all of us would want to live life free of pain and symptoms. But that came up only in 22% of their conversations. Other things came up more often. Over 60% wanted to avoid inappropriate prolongation of dying. What does that mean in the world we live in today with so many technological effects that we can do as doctors? What about achieving a sense of control that 38% of patients wanted to achieve? How much of a sense of control can you have with a life-limiting illness? Patients want to relieve burden on their family members. They want to strengthen relationships with their loved ones. And I ask every time I show this to residents, to students, how much time and effort do we put into any of these things that are so important to patients? Many times it seems that what we're offering is treatments that can give you more time, but that time may be actually more burdensome and more painful and more uncomfortable to the patient. The first step to overcoming these obstacles is to actually discuss with patients what their prognosis is and what their situation is. And this is, again, a rather old study from JAMA in 2008, where they had two groups of patients. One group, they had an end-of-life discussion with them, and the other, they did not. Those who had end-of-life discussions accepted more that their illness is terminal. They wanted to know how much life even more. They didn't want to go to ICU and die there. More of them completed do not resuscitate orders, completed living wills, and their end of life also looked differently. You can see here in the table on the right. Less went to ICU, less of them went on ventilators, less of them underwent resuscitation, which at the end of life can cause more damage than good. Less underwent chemotherapy in the last month of their life. Less underwent feeding tubes, which are not necessarily helpful at the end of life. More of them went to outpatient hospice, and those who went to outpatient hospice spent more time there and actually can enjoy the benefits.
Dr. Shailovich, are you still with us?
I think something happened. Oh,
Yeah, you left for a moment. Are you back?
Yeah, I'm back. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, now
Okay,
you're back.
sorry,
Yes.
not sure what the technical problem was. So I'd like to show you what the World Health Organization defines palliative care as. So first of all, it defines palliative care as an approach to care. There are very few fields of medicine that define themselves as an approach, right? I don't think a pulmonologist would describe himself as a doctor with an approach to someone's lungs, or a cardiologist as an approach to the heart. But here the approach is different because instead of extending life, which is basically the mandate that medicine has received, the approach here is to improve the quality of life. And the quality of whose life? We're talking about quality of life of patients and their families, because you can't really improve quality of life of the patient without improving the quality of life of the family as well. Not to mention the fact that if we don't improve the quality of life of the family, they're going to be the next patients that we have. We have enough evidence to show that those who undergo a more difficult trajectory of end of life, their families suffer more from heart disease, from hypertension, from diabetes, and even from cancer. And who are the patients that we're treating? We're not treating patients at the end of life as we once thought. Palliative care takes care of patients and their families facing problems associated with life-threatening illness. That life-threatening illness may end with a complete cure. It may end in death, but the life-threatening illness itself is a reason to intervene with palliative care as well. Palliative care provides relief from pain and other distressing symptoms. I think this is a part of palliative care that all of us feel most connected to, but it's not the only part of it. Palliative care also affirms life and regards dying, however, as a normal process. I love these graphs just because the guy who put them together gave up in 1996 because 100% of the world's population continues to die. Dying is a normal process. Medicine has turned this into an abnormal process, a process in which we can intervene. We should intervene, sometimes in a very aggressive manner. Palliative care intends neither to hasten nor to postpone death. Frankly, we're not interested in death because there's new about it. What we can do is to try to improve life that comes before it, to try to offer support system that helps patients live as actively as possible until they die, and to offer a support system for the family during the patient's illness and in their bereavement as well. And for this reason, palliative care integrates a lot of different healthcare and non-healthcare disciplines, right? It integrates psychological and spiritual aspects of patient care and uses a team approach to address the needs of patients and their families. There's very little you can do as a single practitioner in the field of palliative care. You need the whole system to work along with you, which is why these baby steps that we're taking now in Israel are so important in order to achieve those goals in the future. We already know from studies that palliative care indeed enhances quality of life and may actually positively influence the course of illness itself. About 15 years ago, a series of studies came out on what's called early palliative care. basically integrating palliative care from the moment of diagnosis. And all those studies showed improvement in quality of life, and all of them showed less depression and less anxiety. But what they were all really worried about is that these patients that we're integrating palliative care early for would actually die earlier, right? If we're integrating palliative care, they'll be getting less treatment, they'll be getting more morphine, they will probably die earlier. So none of these studies showed that these patients die earlier. And one of them, this famous Temel study from 2010 on patients with non-small cell lung cancer, you can see in red those who received early palliative care, and in blue those who received standard of care, which was seeing your oncologist and not necessarily meeting a palliative care team at the first moment. Those who received early palliative care lived 3 months longer. And therefore, the World Health Organization defines that palliative care is applicable early in the course of illness in conjunction with other therapies that are intended to prolong life. And if we once thought that, we give life-prolonging care until at some point there's nothing more we can do and patients move on to hospice care, in which we treat their symptoms only, now we know that life-prolonging care and palliative care are given together. Maybe at the beginning of disease, there is more of a part of life-prolonging care. Maybe that's the more dominant part of their treatment. But with time, palliative care will become essentially a more and more important part of treatment, in which case, at some point, they may reach hospice care, in which there's no role for life-prolonging care anymore, but only for palliative care. And I remind you again that even after death, palliative care continues in the bereavement stage in order to help support families. I was taught, I did my fellowship in palliative care in Toronto, and there I was taught to look at patients through 3 different lenses. The first lens being their prognosis, the second being their symptom burden, and the third being their goals of care. We'll try briefly to discuss at least the first and the third. So I was taught in medical school that to prognosticate is one way to show that you know absolutely nothing in medicine, right? Because you're going to come up with a number, you say the patient has 3 months to live, and then your patient will live for 5 months, and will come back to you and say, you have no idea what you're talking about. And the truth is, we're not very good at prognostication. 200 years ago, the medical profession did nothing but prognosticate. There wasn't much else we can do. But the fact of the matter is we continue to prognosticate because there's nothing else we can do. In order to make any medical decision, we need to have some sort of framework to understand how long this patient is going to live. I'm not going to put him through a very aggressive, painful procedure that you will overcome. Let's say a major surgery you'll overcome after 3 months. If I don't expect this patient to live for 3 months, he's not going to enjoy the benefits of this treatment at all. But it's true not only for medical decisions, but also simple family organization. I don't know how this works in the States, but in Israel, if you have a bank account and your name is on it, even if someone else is on the bank account as well, if you've passed away, it is a bureaucratic nightmare to try to get into that bank account. Something that you can solve with a simple signature beforehand. And it has to do with a lot of other things. We have patients whose children are on their long trip to India after the army. Do I tell them to come back or not? Simpler questions. Do I stay the night? Is it going to happen tonight? Patients ask us this all the time. I also know that we leave as human beings a lot of things that, we don't achieve closure on because we have time. We don't think that our time is limited. And we know that patients at the end of life, this is very important to them, to have that ability to have closure, to say to their loved ones that they love them, to make sure the family is well cared, to say goodbye. So in the world we live in, especially in Israel today, we see and hear on the radio, on television, all the time about horribly dramatic deaths, sudden death, healthy soldiers dying within minutes. But the fact of the matter is, most death, over 99% of death, is not sudden death. In the world we live in today, 99% of people die from chronic diseases that we can expect in advance how they're going to die. And we can split these into 3. The first group would be patients with cancer. And if you look at the y-axis here at their function and the x-axis at time, usually they can start off with a very good level of functioning. Maybe there are small dips here. Maybe here this patient underwent surgery or got their first treatment with chemotherapy. But when we start seeing deterioration of function, mostly when the patient is mostly sitting or lying down, we can safely say that, this trajectory is going downhill, and it's going downhill fast. Usually we can talk about months, maybe a little bit more than that, depending on the disease. The trajectory of patients with organ failure, think of, heavy smokers with COPD or patients with heart failure. Usually their function, again, starts off with 100% function. We see them in the hospital a lot of times when they come in with events of failure, events where they suddenly need a lot more support. Maybe here, the patient needs to go on a CPAP or on oxygen for a while. But further down the line, these events will come closer together, and they'll be more prolonged and more difficult to manage. And more importantly, if we look between these severe episodes, you can see that the function is going down over time. And when a patient is admitted with a severe decompensation, after he's starting off from a position where he's mostly sitting or lying down, that event is going to be a lot more risky for them to overcome. And the third group, more difficult group to prognosticate, is those with dementia or frailty. Those who their function is so minimal that every small thing can send them over the edge, and we don't really know when that's going to happen. Even in this group, we have tools to help us prognosticate. I'm not going to go into that a little further right now. So we discussed prognosis, and we discussed shortly symptom burden earlier. I'd like to spend the rest of the time we have to talk about goals of care, or basically what are we trying to achieve with treatment. So I try to explain to my residents that, when we're giving any treatment, we're shooting an arrow. And what are we trying to achieve with that arrow? Many times we're trying to prolong life. That's most of what we do over the day. But sometimes we have other things that we're trying to achieve. Sometimes we want to relieve suffering. Not necessarily, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're prolonging life. Sometimes one is going to come at the expense of the other. Sometimes we want to improve function. Say rehabilitation. Rehabilitation, if anyone's ever gone through that here, is a lot of suffering. It's a difficult path to go through. Sometimes one comes at the expense of the other. Sometimes we're aiming for cure. If I'm aiming for cure, I live in, say, bone marrow transplant, aiming for cure doesn't necessarily prolong life. A lot of times there's overlap, but sometimes there isn't. And my mentor in Toronto once taught me, at the moment you realize you're starting to make compromises between these different goals, you realize you're in the realm of palliative care. And many times that discussion is going to be between prolonging life and relieving suffering. Many times we can shoot that arrow and hit exactly in the middle, and we're going to achieve all those goals all at once. But many times one is going to come at the expense of the other. And in order to decide, the only person who can decide is the patient himself. And that is achieved through a process of advanced care planning. That process is not to know, is this patient going to be intubated or not going to be intubated at 2 o'clock in the morning? But in order to reach that decision, I need to go through
Dr. Sholov, are you there? Can everybody else hear me?
We can hear you. He gets.
Right. I think we lost Dr. Oh, are you back?
Terribly sorry. This seems to be dropping out all the time, but we are back. Excuse me 1 second. Just screen share the right part. My apologies. So we were discussing first, what do I know about my disease? Then what is important to me? After that, what are my goals of care? What do I want to achieve? I want to achieve something that's important to me, but if it's not important to me, it's not necessarily something I want to achieve. Only after I've gone through these steps can I finally decide what treatments would actually achieve those goals. If a patient wants to spend as much time at home as possible, I'm not sure that aggressive chemotherapy is going to serve that goal. And we need to go through this with each patient, sometimes many times, sometimes overcome a few discussions, sometimes they'll change their mind. Just want to briefly show you the Advanced Care Directive of the Ministry of Health in Israel. These are 9 pages of legal material. The joke has it that if you don't want to die before you start filling it out, by the time you're done, you definitely do. It's a difficult form to fill out. There are very few of them that have been filled out in Israel. And to my mind, the difficulty is not necessarily filling out the form, but actually reaching a point where I can fill out the form. Showing you briefly the first 2 pages, there are more pages, and discuss what I want to be, how I want to be treated if I have a prognosis of 6 months, how I want to be treated if I have a prognosis of 2 weeks. All these are very complex decisions that are not medical. They're complex, ethical, religious, cultural decisions, family decisions that need to be reached. So thank you for your patience, and again, my apologies for the glitches along the way. I'll leave you with Snoopy, who always leaves me with a smile. Someday we will all die, Snoopy. True, but on all other days we will not. Thanks again.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sholov. And again, if there are any questions, you can feel free to place them in the chat, and we'll try to get to them a little later in the program. As I mentioned, one of the important uniquenesses of Tsahar120 is the integration of our social workers into the service that we provide. And transitioning to that next part of the program, we're honored to have with us Miriam Naiman, who is a social worker and the Senior Support Services Coordinator for Bnefsh, who will present that aspect of the relationship between social work and palliative care, and the role of social workers in the community and in the service. So, Miriam, you can take the floor.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. Actually, I think, Dr. Sholov, you said it all, and I don't have too much more to add. Your presentation was excellent. I just do want to clarify for everybody listening, I am a senior advisor at Bnefsh, and while I have the responsibility of a tremendous amount of guidance for the population with any type of medical need, it doesn't have to be a senior by any means. I am not a social worker. I just want to make that clear. But I would like to touch upon some very important points when we talk about palliative care. And the first point I would like to discuss is the importance of communication and the team. Dr. Sholov mentioned the word team on several of his slides. And who is the individual's team? Is the individual alone? Is he an individual? Or is he part of a family? And if we focus on people living in Israel, does that family live here? Does the family need to fly in? What is the relationship with the family? And so when we talk about palliative care, I think that it is crucial to take this into consideration at the very beginning. Just as when, God forbid, the doctor says, this is your diagnosis, this is a time to begin to think of, what does that mean? So true, Dr. Sholov, I'm going to end up echoing much of what you said, because I think that at a certain point in time, there is only so much to say, and a person has to then be ready to absorb it, receive it, and accept the fact why a team is important. For an individual who was always so very, very independent, and I'm in charge, and I can, first and foremost, if they're living in Israel, and depending on how long they've lived in Israel, navigating such a treacherous journey, an unknown journey, can be very, very daunting and challenging, and already add like a level of depression that might not be necessary if they can already turn to and know who to turn to within the team. And the team can expand from the specialist who's given that diagnosis, the family doctor. The family doctor may already be somebody that an individual has a relationship with. And where can I turn within my kuppah? Expanding from the social worker in the kuppah to a broader sense of a social worker, doctors who specialize in palliative care, my family. Do I need a social worker to help bridge a relationship with my family that may have been broken in the past? Am I here on my own? Do I need to go back to wherever I came from, because now I'm at a certain point, and while I was able to live so independently all these years in Israel, maybe I need to go back to where I have the support that I need for my dignity. Because as we go through those stages, dignity becomes even more important than ever before. And that is something that I can share on a personal level, that palliative care can give an individual, and the truth is so much more here in Israel, where we value quality of care and life for a senior citizen much more than any other country that I know of. I realize that palliative care doesn't have to be specific to a senior individual, but if we talk about more seniors and getting towards ends of life, either, as you mentioned, Dr. Shalov, with dementia or cancer, which we see so much more happening with individuals over the age of 70, 80, because we are living so much longer, having that support system for the family is so valuable, because it can end up with a quality of closure that may not have happened otherwise. And that quality of closure is really what the living members of a family are left with. And nobody wants to be left with regret. Nobody wants to be left with, oh, I should have said, I should have done. And if one can, just like so many other things, we have a plan. There are people here who know me, I see familiar faces, and they know that one of my favorite expressions is, what's the plan? And although we don't like to think of death, and we don't like to think that we are going to be the one within that statistic that's going to fall within this illness, why not prepare so that we can be surprised, so that we can be the one that the surgery really works, so that we can be the one that, although our time has come, we know that we feel complete if a person is within their faculties. Nothing can replace the value of closure with an individual. Nothing in the world, because there's nothing left afterwards. You can't just say that one more word. There are plenty of English-speaking professionals in Israel who are there and available to help a family, whether a family arrived yesterday, whether they are arriving whenever. The English-speaking mental health population in Israel is quite vast and quite broad, with all of their different specialties, which may include grief counseling. There may be support groups that you are not aware of. The individuals who specialize in all different types of grief. Sometimes it's not only grief for an adult child, it could be for a grandchild. It could be a young person who's been stricken with such an illness, and now a family is really falling apart. You have a young widow, you have children. Who is there to hold the family? And knowing about these services are just crucial, and they're not in a book, and they're not just on one website. And something that Israel has that a person will not find abroad is the integration and relationship between halacha, between Judaism, and end of life. And as Rabbi Fass mentioned, there are so many questions that come into play together, again, with dignity and respect for the individual, him or herself. And how does one integrate all of those things with direction, with rabbinical direction, with legal direction? That end-of-life document that Dr. Shalov showed, I actually filled that out for a family member. And yes, it's many pages, but it's so important. Another thing that Dr. Shalov mentioned, which I'm just going to echo again here, is the bank account. At 120, when a couple is married, they could have had that joint bank account for 60, for 70 years. And if a particular document is not signed, then that account is frozen until the will is probated. And as he said, Dr. Shalom said, it is, in fact, a bureaucratic nightmare. It doesn't matter that you have power of attorney. It doesn't matter that you have durable power of attorney. But this particular form must be signed. Ask your banker about it. I think what I would just like to leave you with, anybody who's listening, is consider a plan. Consider the team. Who's on the team? Who does the individual want to be on the team? And who does the family want to be on the team? We know that those aren't always the same people. But what makes the individual most comfortable, and where are his faculties to really understand with clarity what is making him or her more comfortable. And the quality of closure. Now, there could be a very long time between making the plan and end of life. And please God, a family has the opportunity, or an individual has the opportunity to go on that journey so that by the end of the journey, they can feel as complete as possible. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Miriam. And again, any questions can please be placed in the chat, and we'll get to them very shortly. Our final presenter this evening is Rav Yuval Sherlow, who is the director of the Tzahar Center for Jewish Ethics and the founding director of Czahar120, to provide the halachic perspective on the issues that we're discussing tonight. Rav Sherlow.
Thank you, Jeremy. The former presentations were so good, so therefore I decided to change my presentation and to share with you our 5 big questions that we faced when we established the Tzahar of ה-120, and to speak about them, because actually these are the main halachic and the main questions that everyone has. The first question is palliative care permitted at all? What do we mean? If you ask in the street, what is the image of the halacha, and what is the halacha opinion about life, you usually will hear the following. Our life belongs to God, to Hashem. Because of that, we cannot make any concessions and any compromises. We must do everything that we can for every minute of life. And we must understand that we don't know, we can't evaluate what is the meaning of life. Only Hashem can take life, and so therefore we have always to ventilate into nutrition and whatever that we have to do. This is wrong because of 2 reasons. The first reason is from the philosophic point of view. And the philosophic point of view is there's a kind of a jump or a kind of a gap that people crossed, because then when they say that because of the halacha and because our life that don't belong to us, so therefore we have to do everything in order to expand them. That's not right, because maybe I do believe, and I hope all of us believe, that our life is from Hashem, but it's not that we are doing everything, and it's something that is active in order to kill ourselves, to suicide or whatever. It's the opposite. It's the decision not to do anything when we feel so bad, when we have pain, when we have problems. So therefore, it's completely different. This is the idea about palliative care, because we're shifting from trying to expanding life to, as we heard before, the quality of life. But it's also wrong from the halachic perspective. We have in Hebrew, I will not bring it now, but if one day we'll speak and I have time to show it, we have the greatest Rabbanim, really the greatest Rabbanim. I'm talking about Rav Kanievsky, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, the father, not, and I'm talking about Reb Shlomo Zalman and the Tzitz Eliezer, whatever. And I had a long, long discussion with Reb Hershel Schechter a year ago about that. All the great rabbis say it's something wrong. So from the halachic perspective, not only from the philosophy perspective, we are permitted, and maybe sometimes it's prohibited to ventilate and to expend the suffering and then the pain. We have to be very careful not to do it too early. But the idea about palliative care, that the palliative care is permitted according to halacha, is the first and the most important thing to say, and this is the first challenge that we have. The second thing is the idea about the patient autonomy. Something was changed in medical ethics. When I started to work in medical ethics, I'm talking about 40 years ago in the hospitals, there was a very, very systematic idea. The first principle was don't cause any damage, is something in Latin. The second thing was the importance or the holiness of life. And the third thing was respect the patient. If you can check, and you can see that all three of them don't have even one idea about what we are doing today, and that is the autonomy of the patient. And the idea that everything should be done after getting his permission and asking him, what do you want? And if you want us to continue, if you want us to stop, and what medicine do you want, and what we call informed consent. It's not only the agreement, it's also the saying it has to be informed consent, that the patient will understand everything before he makes decisions. Now, we as halachic people are not used to the idea that we can make the decision. Usually, when we have such a question, and this is death and life question, we understand that we have to ask the rabbi, what should we do? Or he should make the decision. Or even if not the rabbi or specific rabbi, the halacha should tell us to do X or to do Y. And the idea that the halacha permisses to choose. And you can do this and you can do that. You can want to expend your life even if you're suffering, and do everything you can. And there is a point that from there on you can say, enough is enough. Leave me alone and let me say goodbye to everyone of my family and not suffer anymore. This idea is very difficult for halachic people, because we, as I said, we are used to get orders. We are used to get the halachic decisions. So therefore, this is the second thing that we as Tzahar120 rabbis had to explain and had to bring sources. And as I said, everything that we are doing is really part of a very wide range of rabbis that agree that there is a point where a person can make a decision and can decide if he wants this or that. The third thing is specific. And the most problematic thing, as you know, is really nutrition. I was part of a very, very professional group in Israel of doctors and other people that wrote a paper about nutrition, because nutrition is really, really very, very problematic. Not only because, first of all, I'll say it that way. First of all, emotionally. Yeah, emotionally, not to feed is really a very, very problematic issue. And to make this decision is very, very, it's hard to do that. I really recommend everyone that want to read about ethical consideration of medical nutritional therapy at end of life. It was published in Clinical Nutrition Open Science, and it has a lot of downloads because people all over the world are really very interested in this paper. And to say not to ventilate, I think that people got used to that, but not to feed. And there are all kind of circumstances and statuses that where feeding is actually, it's a kind of a torture, and sometimes it's even causing damage, and sometimes there's no need about it, and whatever. I really recommend everyone to read about it, and to read also our paper in English. We have it in our website, in order to explain that even though it seems like something that it's so difficult to say not to feed anymore, we did it today. But this was the right decision. And I think that the family is really, really thankful to us for this advice. And we didn't do it by ourselves. We did it with the whole staff, and it was a process. But I think that this is the right thing to do sometimes, and we have to know when yes and when not. The fourth thing is who makes the decision in the family when the patient is unable. Now, according to the Israeli law, there's a gap between the Israeli law and the Israeli custom. according to the law, the family really doesn't have any status, almost any status, unless it was appointed as a representative or whatever. There's a new law in Israel that the hospital can nominate the family for 6 months to make the decisions. But I want to say something about the family, to say something about us. And I want to describe a typical dialogue in a hospital. We have it twice a day. And now I'm taking out all the mercy and all the solidarity, whatever. I'm talking about as mathematic, okay? And listen very carefully. We come to the family and we tell them, maybe your father is collapsing and is going down the road. Do you want us, we'll have to ask you to ventilate him. So the answer is yes, it's very important for us. We want him to stay with us. And then we ask, you know what? Let's be honest. If you were in the same situation, what was your answer? And they say, honestly, leave us alone and let us die. So then we ask, so why, for father, you're doing something different? And they say, we want to know that, our conscience and that we didn't do anything wrong. So then we ask, so who do you take care of? Your father or yourself? And then they start to understand that the family mission is to do good to the patient, not for themselves. And it's something that has to be explained, not only from the social worker and the process, but also from the halacha point of view, that our mission should be doing good to the patient and make him his quality of life or his life much better, even if he has a few minutes or a few days or a few weeks or whatever. And we should pray when we are asking what to pray of. We don't say that our prayer should be refuah shlema, because it's nonsense. It doesn't have any meaning. It's a kind of cheating Hashem. We say that we pray that Hashem yetiv lecha. That means that Hashem will do whatever the best for you. And as we say, v'yimaleh Hashem mish'alot libi letova, that it should be the good thing and the good approach and the good attitude. But this is a real question, because we also have to give sometimes answer, who's the family? Is the family a wife, the parents sometimes, the brothers, the children, or the uncle? Who knows what is the meaning of a family? And in Israel today, every family has one branch that became non-religious, one branch that became Haredi, the older sister that came from abroad and she was disconnected and now she wants to take care of everything by herself. It's something that is very, very difficult. Our main approach, Czahar120, this is, I think, our startup, and it has a great success. When you call our hotline, you get a team of a rabbi and a social worker together. And together they meet the family, the whole family. And from our experience, we know that it's so important to make a decision that all the families agree, even if it takes time, if there are negotiations. We have a process that we know how to achieve it. And it's important for the patient, first of all. It's one decision. It's important for the staff that they get one answer, and it's very important for the family. We heard it before, because after 120 years, they are not splitting and they're not fighting. Oh, we gave up too early, or we really tortured father. From the other hand, and it's very important to make one decision. The fifth question, and I'm finishing. Is it permissible to give advance directives? The answer is yes, with a capital Y. It's very, very important. It's important because then we know that what our wish and our will be done. Then the family are not fighting and are not arguing. They know they got our orders. The staff know what to do. And according to halacha, it's not opening your mouth to the devil. There's a very, very old tshuva of Moshe Feinstein about making insurance or pension or whatever. And he said it's not something that harms your belief. We do believe that our life is in the hand of God and Hashem, but we should make our preparations. And as we know, we know about Avraham Avinu and Yitzchak Avinu and Yaakov Avinu that spoke about what will be after the death. For instance, Jacob asked to be buried in Israel, and also Joseph and whatever. So this is a part of our custom, and it's very important to do. It has so many benefits, and we really recommend to do that. But all those 5 questions, I want to emphasize, many times should be consulted with a rabbi, and I hope that all of you have our hotline. You can write it down, or you can find it on Tsahar120, even as I said, in English. I think it's so important for people to have our advice and help. We are not making the decisions. We are not paskin halacha. We are helping to make the right decisions between the staff, the hospital staff, the family, and the patient, and the halacha. And something that is very interesting is that more and more groups from the hospitals, the doctors call us, and sometimes they're asking what is the right thing to do, and sometimes they're asking us to help them with the family. So this is the Tsahar120 idea. I think that even though I really changed my presentation, the fact that I could share our 5 big questions and big challenges that we have, I think that now everybody understands more and can do the right thing when we are facing the end of life. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rav Sherlow. If we could, if there are any just the last summarizing comments from our presenters, there were a couple of questions, but most of them were addressed within the chat. But if you want to, I think there was a question for Dr. Shaulov regarding the legal status of advanced care plans. I believe you answered it directly, but if you want to relate to it for the entire forum so that people can understand, the questioner just asked when Prime Minister Sharon had his CVA, the news said he was permanently comatose and that Israeli law did not allow for withdrawal of life support. If that's something you could comment on regarding the legal issues around this issue.
Sure. Just want to clarify, by Israeli law, which is very different than most of Europe and North America, withdrawal of care is not an option. This is Israeli law. Halacha is a whole different story, and it's definitely not my field of expertise, but by Israeli law, you cannot withdraw care, which means you can't withdraw care, which is by definition continuous. So ventilation is by definition continuous. If someone is already on a ventilator, you cannot take him off of that ventilator. What you can do is avoid treatments which are not continuous by definition. If someone is on dialysis, you can choose not to undergo the next dialysis. If someone is receiving antibiotics, you can decide not to receive the next antibiotic. But at the risk of going into the complexity of Israeli law is very complex. But for the better or for worse, law in Israel is mostly a recommendation. A lot of decisions are reached within discussions with families. As Rabbi Shelo alluded to earlier, there is no standing for family within Israeli law. They are not automatic substitute decision makers, and yet we understand the importance of them. I do want to leave with one important message that I have, and I think all the important speakers here mentioned it earlier. The most difficult part of decision making is undergoing the process of decision making, because afterwards you need to live with that decision, and it's based on how that process is done. I think one of the most amazing things that Tsar120 have done with this project is that they intuitively understood that this is not a medical decision. This is not a halachic decision. This isn't even an ethical decision. This is a very complex decision that has a lot of parts to it, and the most important part of it is keeping the family together. We've seen many families broken apart by these very difficult decisions. I think the process is worth investing in. If we can invest time in that to begin with before reaching those difficult decisions before they come to our door, then all the better.
Thank you very much. Miriam, we just got a question. I don't know if you want to relate to this. Are there any roles for registered nurses in palliative care in Israel? Are there inpatient hospice facilities in Israel?
One thing that before I
Sure.
give my attention to those things is that it's important to also remember that any directives that one may have abroad are not relevant here. And so if you have any of the directives that Dr. Shalom spoke about or that anybody has spoken about, even one's will needs to be then taken care of here in Israel. And I have seen and I've spoken to lawyers that it has not ended well. Okay, so right. How does one connect with palliative care? I would actually, unless Dr. Shalom, you should disagree, I know people who begin this process by simply talking to their family doctor. The family doctor can play a very important role, and that's why having that relationship in general is very, very important. And if you are not pleased with your family doctor, or you felt that he or she has not been sensitive to your needs until that point, you may want to consider finding somebody that you have better chemistry with. And palliative care, as we've heard over the past hour, has a lot of different facets to it. And it's very individualized depending on who a person is, what their needs are as an individual, a couple, or a family. And there's so many different concentric circles depending on that person's needs. Are there any roles for registered nurses in palliative care in Israel? I'm not sure that I understand the question, meaning nurses play a lot of different roles in Israel. Dr. Shalom, am I not understanding something here?
No, I agree with you. There's a lot of roles for registered nurses, both in home care, inpatient hospice, and consultation services. There are also nurse practitioners with specialty in palliative care throughout Israel who play a very important role.
One thing that the Kupot Cholim offer, the healthcare providers offer, is that a person who may be bedridden for whatever reason can have certain medical care just from their kupa coming to their home. That's a level of nursing care, not to be confused with home care like a caregiver, but that a nurse comes, will take the blood, will change the dressing, will do different things to make the person comfortable or whatever's necessary so they don't have to be schlepped out to their local clinic. And that's also something that's a little bit different than many places abroad. And while there are those who are very quick to talk about the medical system in Israel, oh, and I had to wait 1.5 years to see that doctor. So there are many ways to navigate the Israeli healthcare system, but I think it's really crucial to remember that it's an amazing socialized system. And it's a public health system. It's available to everyone. And many, many times it comes down to navigating that system and knowing the importance of working with the system instead of working against the system.
Thank you. Any last thoughts, or we're about to conclude, but Rav Sherlo, there was one specific question related to halacha. It's obviously difficult to summarize this in just a minute or two, but the question of extubation in Jewish law. It's referred to as a very complicated question, but if you wanted to just refer to any experience or specific insight that the Rav might have on this specific.
I want to be very careful, and I don't want to make it, briefly. Maybe we'll have to have another. I don't want to answer it in a short answer. Okay, I'm sorry.
I know.
It's a good question. That's the problem. It's not because it's not a good question.
Okay. But with that, I just want to thank everybody for participating and addressing this very important issue. And again, thank you all. Thank you to Nefesh B'Nefesh for your involvement and for help. And we look forward to our continued cooperation and invite everybody to visit the Tzahar120 website. As Shirlo mentioned, all the materials are available both in Hebrew and English. So with that, I wish you all a good night. B'sorot tovot. May we only hear good news soon. Laila tov.